What's going on, everyone? This is Cedric Skysetti.
I'm Becky.
And today we want to give 5 pieces of advice to mixed race couples. Of course, Becky and I, we are in a interracial or mixed race / intraracial relationship. So our case is a little different in that, yes, we have a shared side, being the Korean side, but also we have, I guess our other sides are, I guess what you would consider to be mixed race. And so, even though we have a lot of commonality, there's still a lot of differences with us. And so a lot of things that we've learned and a lot of things that we discuss with each other. And we feel like having this discussion with you guys would be very valuable, because what we've discovered over the last few years of doing Happy Project and also doing this channel is there are a lot of people out there, a lot of you guys out there, in fact, that are in these sort of relationships, and you always, like, there's something that either you're curious about when it comes to how to have a mixed race relationship, or maybe there's certain like troubles or like challenges that you face. And so we realize that, and you know, we're not the answer to everything, but we do have
just to some things.
Right. But we do have insight based off of our relationship and also seeing our parents. Yeah, so we thought it'd be interesting just to talk about it. So, and if you guys are not in mixed race relationships or multi-ethnic relationships, however you want to call it, we still think that this video can be valuable for you, because this can be also just regular relationship advice.
Friendships.
Yeah, definitely. So without further ado, we're gonna bring up 5 pieces of advice.
So the first piece of advice, or the first thing that I learned, is you're going to fall in love just like everyone falls in love. I don't think that there's some magic formula, and also I mean, there are some people who say they're attracted to a certain race, which I think can borderline on fetishizing. But if you're genuinely in love with a person, you'll see a person as they are, and there's nothing weird about it. There's nothing crazy that happens. I think sometimes when you see mixed race couples, some people who are maybe on the outside or seeing that for the first time are like, oh, that's unusual. How did that happen? Right? The fact remains is, we fell in love. We talked, we got to know each other, realized we were really compatible and we connected a lot. Happened to like this person and their personality and the way they think. And I think it's really natural.
Yeah. I think a good example of this is whenever expats in Korea or any foreign country really, you'll oftentimes see that if they don't have, like, I guess, experience with that sort of culture or the race of people, for example, like here in Korea, you'll see that because they're surrounded by mostly Koreans, because we're, you know, in the country, there's a higher likelihood of them falling in love or getting into relationships just because they fall in love with Koreans, which are something that, you know, they don't have experience with. And so I think it's because they end up spending time and getting to know the person that it just happens. And maybe a lot of them never really expected them to say date a Korean, for example. But it happens because I think, I don't know, there's just that human connection and you just vibe.
Right. That's the thing. This is, I honestly think, a big answer to getting rid of prejudice or biases you have against people. Spending time. I really believe that innately every human has a desire to connect, and we connect on much deeper levels than just what you look like or just the outside baseline similarities. And so when you spend enough time with somebody, I really believe that naturally the human desire is to connect, and you're going to find things that you have in common and find things that you like about the other person. And so you might not expect that you would ever get on well with a certain type of person, but innately all humans want to.
Right. So the second piece of advice is this: it's okay to ask questions. It just really depends on your motivation behind the question and also how you ask it. Now, I think with couples who are, you know, in a relationship where they're dating a partner that's like just totally different culturally from them, there's naturally going to be a lot of curiosities that they'll have about, say, the other culture. And I think, especially nowadays, at least in the West, it can be sort of borderline offensive if you ask certain questions, you know, to certain people. Like for example, like people aren't going to necessarily just be like, so how does your people view this, or how does your people, act in this situation, right? Because it could tend to come off as offensive. But I think that having these curiosities, one, is really a good thing, but it's just presenting it to your partner in a way that will facilitate a discussion.
Sure.
And you're learning, you know what I mean? So
Right.
I think that's pretty interesting. And Becky's really good with that. Because you asked
thank
me.
you.
Yeah.
Well, I ask a lot of questions.
Yeah. I guess I don't ask a lot of questions to you about like.
I think because I just tell you anyway.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Well, this is the thing. Communication is a two-way street. This is something, it's such a simple concept that I feel like a lot of people don't quite understand it or practice it. This is what separates good communicators from bad communicators in all aspects of life. Communication is a two-way street. So I might, on my side, be like, well, I want to know, so you should tell me because I want to know. And then the way you ask it is not translating or communicating to the other person, so they don't want to respond. Communication isn't happening then. So it's how you say it, which is very significant, and from where it's coming from.
Right.
So the perfect example is with, how you cut your hair. Your hair, right? His hair is very different from my hair, and I've never encountered hair like yours. So it is a good example of me saying, why do you cut your hair like that? Why don't you just go to a Korean salon? Because to me, it makes perfect sense. Just go to a Korean salon.
Yeah, she's not like, why you cut your hair like
what's
that?
What's the big deal? Right. So it's how you ask it. Oh,
Yeah.
so you cut your hair like this? Oh, this is what a fade is? Oh, this is why you can't do this kind of style?
I'm proud of you. You know the terms and everything.
Thank you. I'm learning. So this is what is very, very significant. And it's easier to do it on something so simple like haircuts, but when it gets to really complicated things or things that maybe are triggering or extremely harmful when it's spoken outside of an intimate relationship, that's when you have to be even more careful. So communication is key. And ask yourself first, why am I asking this question? Is it morbid curiosity, or do I genuinely care? And then how can I say it so the other person receives it well, so they can respond and facilitate a discussion?
Definitely. So there needs to be a sense of trust enough in each other that you're not coming out to attack them when you're asking questions or belittle them.
Yeah.
So I think that's very important to make sure you have that established, that understanding of mutual respect and then trust in the other person. And from there, you'll be able to have discussions without getting offended. And then really, you'll be able to learn a lot from each other, which I think would be awesome.
You're so good at that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel emotional now.
Really?
I don't know why.
Are you gonna cry?
I don't know why I feel emotional. Because you're so sweet. Okay, sorry. That came out of nowhere. Ooh. There are going to be some things you just don't understand. Don't pretend like you do. I think this can be really difficult when you're in a relationship. You obviously care so much for that person. You're willing to do everything for that person. You want to be part of every aspect of their life. But there are going to be some experiences that you'll just never ever have, and will have a very hard time understanding it, and even have a hard time sympathizing with it because you're just completely on the outside. And I think a lot of this, there's a lot of that plays with racial tensions that exist in certain societies, right? So you might want to say, I get it. I understand. People are discriminating against you, and that makes me angry because I care so much about you. But you gotta be really careful because, frankly, you haven't faced. Maybe you didn't face that kind of discrimination. Right. And you won't come off as a sympathizer. You won't come off as understanding and compassionate. You'll come off as a fake. And that's really, really, really dangerous, I think, in having an honest relationship.
Yeah. It can be challenging, especially when you're talking about, for example, like racism type issues, when one side in the relationship has experienced that or, knows people who have experienced that. It's a fine line, in terms of bringing those things up and trying to empathize and put yourself in those shoes. But 9 times out of 10, you're really not going to be able to understand from their perspective. And so what I think, at least for me, speaking for myself, I know a lot of other brothers and sisters feel this way too. I think just having the humility to say, I don't understand, but I want to learn as much as I can to the best of my ability, and really asking questions to try to genuinely understand the experiences of, say, for example, Black people in the U.S. I think that goes a long way. Like for me, I really appreciate that, because the way I look at it is, if you were born as a white person in the U.S., you couldn't help that you were born white. You can't help that you were born, in my opinion, in a system that favors you. So I'm not going to put that against you, and I'm not going to expect you to also like try to understand my perspective in a sense of experientially. But if you come to me and say, I recognize my privilege, then I can appreciate that. And if you're curious to learn more about my experiences or the experiences of my people, so to speak, I think for me, I can appreciate that. You know what I mean? And it's not about me expecting them to understand from my perspective. It's more so just I want to see that they want to understand.
Yeah,
that's what I want to see, basically.
I think it's kind of saying like, I'm on your side.
So the fourth piece of advice is your parents might ask you questions, and getting offended is never the answer. So this one is interesting, because I think you and we have probably different experiences with this.
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, my mom hasn't really asked me any questions about you in particular. I have been in previous relationships where the girl, the significant other,
what person, else were you dating?
Where she was not Korean. So I don't necessarily remember specifically any questions that my mom would have. I mean, she would ask about her family and just how they did things. But I think in this case, because you are half Korean, my mom automatically just felt comfortable and didn't have any questions. I mean, outside of how's your family, things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but your experience might be a little different.
Yeah, of course, my experience was different. When we first started dating, so I want to give just a quick background on my parents. Obviously, my mom's Korean, my dad's white, but we were raised, to be honest, race was never at the forefront of our mind or conversations. I never saw my parents interact with people differently than how they ever treated each other or us. So I never really considered race as a thing until I was much older, because our household was just so open. So that was something I'm so thankful for. So for me, it was in reality a bit of a kind of surprise, because we never talked about race. It wasn't a problem with anybody. When you and I started dating, I remember my dad had asked me, so are you guys, what did he say? Something like, you guys must get a lot of looks walking around in Korea. Do people stare a lot? And then saying, honestly, even in the States, people would stare at you. That's just something that would happen. And he wasn't saying it in like, you gotta be careful, just pointing it out. And so it made me think, oh gosh, yeah, that is something to consider. And then that's when I started thinking about the rest of my family. How would other family members think about us? How would other people see this? And it is still something that I think about a lot. And then my mom was she's more blunt than my dad. And my mom straight up said, and she says in Korean, but translated like, he's also Black, even though she knows you're also Korean. She says, he's also Black. How are your friends gonna view that? And are you okay with that? She asked me that, are you okay? And not in an offensive manner, but genuinely wanting to know, are you really okay with that? And she said, how about when you're in Korea, when you're working with other people and in businesses, how do people treat him? Are you gonna be okay with that? Because my mom has that awareness.
Yeah.
And it could have been, I think, very easy. If race was a touchy subject in our household, it could have been very easy for me to be like, what do you mean would people have a problem with that? I don't see, do you have a problem? Then why are you asking me these questions?
Right.
And it's never the answer to get offended by that. And I feel like a lot of times those kind of questions either are backed up by just fear because you don't know anything, and it's your kid, so you just want the best for your child. Or sometimes it is a racist attitude behind it. But either way, you should not, in my opinion, cut it off. So with my mom, I just explained very clearly, yeah, Mom, you know what? These are things that I thought about. And these are things we talk about regularly. But you know what? It's okay, we're working through it. And you'll also love him, and you'll love his family. You don't have to worry.
If you guys have seen my parents' story that I released 2 years ago now, on how they met and how they got together, just to remind you, if you saw it, that my mom's mom did not like my dad. So my mom's mom, my grandmother, actually hated him and would call him names. And my dad, who is such a model example of this point, especially, I'm sure it hurt, deep down inside, but he never got offended, at least not openly. I mean, it's an offensive thing to get a name called at you because of your race, but my dad he played it cool, and he was like, you know what, let me just, I guess, fight hatred with love and just show her that I can treat her daughter with respect and we can have a really loving relationship. And of course, over time, my grandma changed. She did a 180 and just absolutely loved my dad. So I think had my dad gotten offended at her early on and showed it, then things would have played out differently, because my grandma wouldn't have had a reason to change. She wouldn't have had a reason to change.
That's a great point.
So in my opinion, even though I understand where my grandma's coming from, I do think that her perspective was wrong, but it wouldn't have changed if my dad was just oh, you're wrong, or was very accusing her, even though my dad would have been in the right, in my opinion. So I think just him taking the humble road, and it's unfair, yes, it is. But if you want to move forward and progress in change, and seeing change in your relationship or in your dynamics of the family and stuff like that, I think that is a big part. It's just being humble and just biting your tongue. And I love how our family story played out, because my grandma loves my dad.
Love won.
I grew up with my grandma, because my grandma ended up living with us growing up. She loved my dad. So it was beautiful.
There are going to be people who are going to say very hurtful things, and you got to be ready for that and consider how you're going to respond, because people are going to say just the most horrible things, and it sounds unfair, doesn't it? Because it puts a lot of pressure on you to keep cool and be respectful when the other person is not being respectful. But I mean, that's just the way it works sometimes, and you gotta take the high road, or you consider ahead of time, how am I going to respond to that? So I've thought about that a lot too, and sometimes I'm laying in bed, and if say something bad happened to me during the day, sometimes I'll lay in bed and I'll imagine, just come back to me, say that to me one more time. This is how I'm gonna respond. I think you guys know how that feels. Sometimes I do that because I'm a little vengeful, okay? I admit it, all right? But you have to figure out, how am I going to respond to those people? If let's say this family member says this horrible thing the first time he or she meets us, how am I going to respond to that? And think ahead of time so you keep your cool in the situation. Don't let your emotions take over.
Yeah, that's good advice. I usually don't have the foresight to think, how would I respond in this situation?
Yeah, you just snap.
I don't snap.
Okay, just kidding.
I don't snap. I troll, or I have trolled. Yeah. So for me, luckily, and the internet has confirmed this, but with people I don't know, I don't really care what you think when it comes to my relationship or my race, ethnicity, culture, whatever. So you could say whatever hurtful things, and I won't take it personally. Then again, I haven't had anyone in my face just at least in a very long time, just outright, demean me because of my race. But I'm talking for example, on the internet and stuff like that, all these comments on these videos. And of course, the internet, you're 10 times more confident to say trashy things, because no one's going to be there to whip your tail in the shade. But for me, those comments don't really bother me. And I attribute that to my dad, who taught me, don't let the opinions of other people affect you in that way. It doesn't matter what they think. That being said, I also personally realize that you can't change the opinions of anybody, really. It's on them to change their opinion based off of their experiences and the facts presented to them. So I know that everyone's not going to look at race and culture the same. And I know that some people will never change. They're going to go to their grave being hateful, being racist. It's sad. But that being said, I don't feel this pressure to try to change people. So I think when I get certain comments and stuff, I choose my battles. And let's just say this is real life. If someone were to...
I was about to ask, would that be different?
I think it would, because I'm gonna always try to find the course of action that doesn't involve throwing fists and stuff like that. I'm gonna try to.
Well, let's say you and I are out in public.
Yeah.
And then someone comes up to you and is like, "Hey, Sky City, I love your YouTube channel. You are so cool." But who's this chick?
Right.
You make a mistake.
Right.
Then what would you do in that case? Well, first you better hold me back, and then you can answer.
Yeah, I'd be like, well, I totally disagree with you, and here's why. And I would try to say it in a matter-of-fact way without being all heated, and just, at that point, for me, I don't think if it's a stranger, I'm not going to try to get in a dialogue with them on the street. You know what I mean? If they really want a dialogue or something like that, email me. I don't know. Yeah, but, I have to be honest. I have to be put in those positions or those situations for me to really know how I'm going to handle, because I can think in my head. But I think the more that I think about how I would handle certain situations, the better prepared I could be.
That's right.
Which is the point of, I guess, number 5 is, just know how you would respond hypothetically. I think it's helpful. Yeah, but at the end of the day, can't change everyone's opinions, and haters gonna hate,
That very classic quote.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you might feel hurt inside, but you gotta deal with your emotions separately.
Yeah.
You can't take it on that person because they're not gonna change.
Yeah, much easier said than done, but it's definitely doable.
Yeah, and just protect your own relationship. Just be
definitely
be happy together.
I mean, if we could do like just the bonus piece of advice is you always gotta have each other's back. Always.
Yeah. I have your back and your front and your side. I have everything, and you have mine.
I do.
So those are our 5 pieces of advice, and as you can see, there's loads more to talk about. So in fact, we're coming out with a second video, part 2, with 5 more pieces of advice to come up soon. And in the meanwhile, leave a comment below if there was anything that surprised you or anything that personally you related to really strongly, or if you've got more advice that you'd like to share, you can leave it in the comments below and we'll definitely check that out. In the meanwhile, make sure you follow us on social media and subscribe to the YouTube channel, and we'll see you guys in the next video.
Remember to always seize the day. Peace.